This story is titled The Ghost of a Perfect Love. My name is Carl. I'm 58 years old, and I've been living in Savannah, Georgia for as long as I can remember. A charming city, they say. A place where every corner whispers tales of the past. But lately, my life has felt less like the peaceful southern dream and more like a suffocating nightmare. I'm a retired carpenter, and I've always been proud of my work. The smell of fresh wood, the feel of a finished table under my hands. But none of that pride prepared me for the emotional mess I find myself in today. You see, I'm with someone who I thought would be my last great love. Her name is Joanne. She's 54, sharp as a tack, with a laugh that can light up a room. When we first met at a local charity event, I thought, this is it. This is the woman I've been waiting for. We shared stories about our pasts over cups of coffee, traded jokes like old friends, and danced under the stars like teenagers rediscovering the beauty of love. But then, something began to change, a small crack in what I thought was a flawless foundation. It started subtly. Joanne would mention her ex. Not just mention him, though. She'd paint him as a masterpiece. Oh, you would have loved Mark. He had this incredible way of understanding me. You know, he just got me. Or, Mark was the kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone feel seen. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. After all, everyone has a past. I wasn't naive enough to believe otherwise. But soon, Mark wasn't just a name. He became a shadow in every room we occupied together. One evening, we were watching a movie, some romantic drama Joanne had picked out. There was this scene where the leading man cooked dinner for his partner, and I thought, hey, I could do that. So the next night, I surprised her with a meal I'd spent hours preparing. It wasn't gourmet by any means, but it was heartfelt. As she took her first bite, she smiled faintly and said, "This is nice. Mark used to make something similar, but he added a little paprika to give it that extra kick." Her words hit me like a slap. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside I felt like I was crumbling. Was I just a placeholder? Was I nothing more than a poor imitation of this man I'd never met? It wasn't just the cooking. Joanne seemed to weave Mark into everything. She'd compare my sense of humor to his, my choice of clothes, even the way I held her hand. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, am I competing with a memory? Then came the night that everything changed. We were out for dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. It was one of those cozy spots where the lights are dim and the music is soft enough to make every word feel intimate. I'd been carrying this weight on my chest for weeks, and I thought, Tonight, I'll tell her how I feel. But before I could say a word, Joanne leaned forward, her eyes misty with nostalgia. "You know, Carl," she began, "I've been thinking a lot about Mark lately. He wasn't perfect, but there was just something about him. Something I've never quite found in anyone else." My heart sank. My hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly that my knuckles turned white. And then, without fully realizing what I was doing, I asked, "Joanne, do you still love him?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But she didn't get angry. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked away, her gaze distant. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe a part of me always will." That night, I sat alone in my living room, nursing a glass of whiskey and staring at an old photo of Joanne and me from our first trip together. We looked so happy, so full of promise. But now, all I could see were the invisible threads of another man, binding her heart in ways I couldn't untangle. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her again? Should I demand she let go of a love that clearly still lingered? Or should I walk away, save myself the pain of being a second choice? The questions gnawed at me, each one heavier than the last. I thought about Mark, the perfect ex. I didn't know much about him, only the pieces Joanne had shared. He sounded like a good man, someone who had clearly left a mark on her heart. But why had their relationship ended? If he was so perfect, why wasn't he the one sitting across from her at dinner, making her laugh, holding her hand? And then, a darker thought crept in, a thought I couldn't shake. What if I'll never measure up? The days turned into weeks, and the tension between Joanne and me grew thicker. I tried to focus on the things that once brought me joy, working on small woodworking projects, spending time with my dog Tucker. But even then, Mark's shadow loomed large. One afternoon, I decided to clean out the storage closet. It was a mindless task, something to keep my hands busy while my mind raced. That's when I found it, a small box labeled Memories. Inside, I found old letters, photographs, and trinkets from Joanne's past. I knew I shouldn't, but curiosity got the better of me. There among the keepsakes was a letter from Mark. His handwriting was neat, his words tender. He spoke of their time together, of dreams they'd once shared. But what struck me most was the final line. No matter where life takes us, know that you'll always have a piece of my heart. As I held the letter, a wave of emotions crashed over me. Anger, sadness, envy. But beneath it all was a profound sense of clarity. Joanne wasn't holding on to Mark because she wanted to hurt me. She was holding on to him because he represented something she feared losing forever. The idea of a perfect love. And maybe I'd been doing the same. The box of memories stayed with me long after I placed it back on the shelf. I couldn't unsee the letter, couldn't unfeel the ache it stirred inside me. Joanne wasn't just reminiscing about Mark. She was clinging to a time in her life when love felt effortless, when every moment seemed painted in the golden glow of possibility. And maybe I was clinging too. Clinging to the hope that I could somehow replace a piece of her heart that would never fully belong to me. That night, I found myself at the edge of the bed, staring at Joanne as she slept. Her face was peaceful, framed by the faint moonlight slipping through the curtains. She didn't know the storm brewing inside me. I wanted to shake her awake, to shout, "Why can't I be enough? Why can't you let him go?" But I knew that wasn't the answer. The truth was, Mark wasn't the problem. Joanne wasn't the problem. The problem was that we were standing in the ruins of something we hadn't fully built yet, trying to decide if it was worth salvaging. The next morning, over coffee, I finally broke the silence. "Joanne," I began, my voice quieter than I intended, "we need to talk." She looked up from her cup, her brow furrowing slightly. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "It's about Mark." Her expression shifted. Guilt, maybe, or something close to it. "Carl, I don't mean to make you feel—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "I know you don't, but I need to understand something. Are you still in love with him? Or are you in love with who you were when you were with him?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Joanne set her mug down, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I'm in love with the memory of a time when life felt easier, when I didn't feel so broken." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, not because they hurt, but because I understood them. I understood what it felt like to look back on a time when life made more sense, when love didn't feel like an uphill battle. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "Joanne," I said softly, "I can't compete with a memory, and I don't want to. But I need to know if you're willing to build something new with me, something that's ours, not his." She looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't want to lose you, Carl. I don't. But I don't know how to let go of the past." Her honesty was both a relief and a heartbreak. I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Then let's figure it out together. Let's face the ghosts and clear them out of the room, one by one. But I need you to meet me halfway." Joanne nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "I'll try," she promised. The weeks that followed weren't easy. We had hard conversations, peeling back layers of old wounds and unspoken fears. Joanne told me about the pain of losing Mark, about how their relationship had ended not because they didn't love each other, but because life had pulled them in different directions. And I told her about my fears, about feeling like a stand-in, about the insecurity that crept in every time she mentioned his name. We didn't solve everything overnight. There were still moments when Mark's name would slip into a conversation, still moments when I felt like I was living in his shadow. But slowly, we started to rebuild. We started to create memories that were uniquely ours. Weekend road trips, shared projects, quiet evenings spent reading side by side. Then one day, something changed. Joanne and I were walking through the park, Tucker trotting happily ahead of us. She was talking about her plans for the garden when she suddenly stopped and turned to me. "Carl," she said, her voice steady but soft, "I need to tell you something." I braced myself, unsure of what was coming. I've been holding on to Mark for so long because I was afraid that if I let go, I'd lose a part of myself. But being with you has shown me that love isn't about holding on to the past. It's about choosing the present. And I choose you. Her words washed over me, melting away the doubts and fears that had haunted me for months. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly as the world seemed to fade away. "I choose you too," I whispered. From that day on, things weren't perfect. No relationship ever is. But we learned to face the imperfections together, to embrace the messy, beautiful reality of building a life with someone. Joanne still had her memories of Mark, but they no longer felt like a threat. They were simply a part of her story, just as my past was a part of mine. And as for me, I stopped measuring myself against a ghost. I realized that love isn't about being someone's everything. It's about being enough for them in the here and now. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt the weight of comparison or the ache of feeling like you're not enough, I want you to know that you're not alone. Love is complicated, messy, and sometimes downright painful, but it's also worth fighting for. And if my story moved you, if it made you think or feel something you weren't expecting, then I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes the stories we share can help others find their way through the darkness.